Imagine for a second that the capital city of your state was just in limbo for years. A place that was meant to be the heart of government, but its actual status was caught up in legal and political fights. Well, that was the reality for Amaravati. And after a whole decade of twists and turns, its fate has finally been settled by law.
But that right there brings up a really interesting question, doesn't it? Why would Parliament need to pass a special law just to name a capital city? I mean, isn't that something a state just decides for itself? Well, the story behind this law is a fascinating tale of division, of shifting political winds, and of some very big promises.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the brand new law that just passed. Then we're going to rewind the clock to see how the state's division kicked this whole thing off. We'll get into that dramatic three capitals idea, the legal mess that followed, and figure out why a central law became the only way out. And finally, we'll look at the one big question that's still hanging in the air.
Okay, let's dive right in, starting with the big event that finally brought this decade of uncertainty to an end.
So here's the headline moment. On April 2nd, 2026, the Indian Parliament passed the Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Amendment Bill, and this law did one incredibly important thing. It officially and legally recognized Amaravati as the one and only capital of the state, period. Now, you might think a vote like this would be super contentious, but it actually passed with pretty broad support. You had the ruling NDA coalition and the main opposition, the Congress Party, both voting for it. The only major party to oppose it was the YSRCP, and their reason for voting no? Well, that's pretty much the key to this whole story. To really get why this law was necessary in the first place, and to understand the YSRCP's opposition, we have to jump in a time machine. The roots of this whole issue go back more than a decade, to when one big state was split into two. So back in 2014, the Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act was passed. This carved out the new state of Telangana from the old Andhra Pradesh. Now, the law had this really unique arrangement. The great city of Hyderabad would act as a joint capital for both states, but only for 10 years, max. That set a ticking clock, and that clock ran out in June 2024. Andhra Pradesh had to find and build a new capital of its very own. The original plan seemed pretty straightforward. But, politics is rarely that simple. A big change in government led to a massive and pretty controversial change of plans that sent the entire state down a completely different road. Yeah, this slide lays it out perfectly. After the split in 2014, the NDA government had a plan for a single, grand, unified capital, a brand new city called Amaravati. But then, in 2019, the YSRCP came to power with a totally different vision, a decentralized model with three capitals. You'd have the executive branch in Visakhapatnam, the legislature in Amaravati, and the courts in Kurnool. And just like that, the entire future of Amaravati was thrown into complete chaos. So what happens when you have two different governments, one after the other, with completely opposite plans for something as fundamental as the capital city? Well, the whole fight inevitably ends up in one place, the courtroom. Let's just walk through the legal maze here. After the three-capital plan was announced, it was immediately challenged. In March 2022, the Andhra Pradesh High Court actually ruled against it, but the YSRCP government didn't back down. They took their case to the Supreme Court. Before that could be settled, though, the 2024 elections brought the NDA back into power, and they immediately said, nope, we're sticking with Amaravati. All of this legal back and forth meant that for years, everything just ground to a halt. So this brings us right back to that original question. If the new government wanted Amaravati all along, why did they need to go through the whole process of amending a central act? Why not just pick up where the last government left off?
Well, it all came down to one word: permanence. The new government knew that if a simple change in political power could derail the entire capital project once, it could absolutely happen again. So, to stop a future government from just undoing everything, they needed to do more than just make a new plan. They had to actually amend that original 2014 Central Act and basically carve Amaravati's status into federal law.
And the amendment itself is actually really precise about how it does this. It does three key things. First, it makes Amaravati the capital, going all the way back to June 2nd, 2024, the exact day the deal with Hyderabad ended. Second, it literally just inserts the words "at Amaravati" into the original law, which leaves zero room for debate. And finally, it clearly defines the exact map boundaries of Amaravati, so there's no confusion down the road. All right, so this brings us to the final and maybe the most important part of this whole story. Because even though this new law has settled the political and the legal questions, it leaves a huge human issue completely unresolved, and it's the very issue the YSRCP pointed to when they voted against it.
So to get this, you have to understand something called the land pooling scheme. This was the really clever idea used to get all the land needed for Amaravati. Thousands of farmers voluntarily gave their farmland to the government. But in return, they weren't just getting a check. They were promised a piece of the new city, smaller but fully developed, high-value plots that would make them partners in the capital's success. So when the YSRCP voted against the bill, they made it clear. They said, listen, we are not opposed to the bill, but are unhappy with its present form, as it ignores unfulfilled promises. They were pointing directly at the situation with these farmers.
And this is really the heart of their argument. The new law makes the capital status solid as a rock, legally, but it doesn't offer that same security to the farmers. There's no timeline in the bill, no legal guarantee for when or even how they'll get the developed plots they were promised all those years ago. For them, after a decade of waiting, their investment is still just an unsecured promise.
And so that leaves us with this final, really powerful question. The political war over where to put the capital might be over, but with Amaravati's status now set in stone, how will the state make good on the original promises made to its very first and most important investors, the thousands of farmers who bet their entire livelihoods on a city that until now was little more than a dream? That chapter of the story still waiting to be written.
You can download the complete notes of this video from the pinned comment below. If this video helped, do like and subscribe to the BriefCase for daily visual explanations.